and welcome to the second video of this fanfiction reading series. This was supposed to come out yesterday when I'm recording this intro, but I didn't have enough time to finish it, sorry. Before I start the video, I have a few things to say. First off, there will now be an uploading schedule for this. These will come out hopefully every Wednesday. So if you want to see these every week, please like and subscribe, maybe share with a few friends who like this sort of stuff, I don't know. I'm sorry to ask of this from you, but it helps me much more than you think it does. Anyway, let's get on with the video. Hope you enjoy! This is Being His Dear by the LightYagamiGodKing on AO3, and their account will be linked in the description. You were not surprised in the slightest when you ended up in hell. Not with how scared everyone was of you. You had become convinced they had a good reason to be. You even felt you had your quick end coming to you. Yes, you were very lonely, but you imagined here it would be possible to find someone who understood you, without fearing those you would scare off along the way. No, what surprised you was what hell was like, and what apparently had happened down here not all that long ago. Apparently, this used to be a practically lawless place ruled by Lucifer. In those days, you could pretty much do whatever you wanted if you weren't too nice or passive. That put you at severe risk of ridicule at best and being hurt by stronger demons at worst. Even if there wasn't a formal law, there were still social norms that kept everyone down. Everyone was expected to act nasty to each other and only care about themselves. It sounded like your worst nightmare. The only thing that did not sound so bad about those days was that everyone became a unique-looking demon, often with their own special powers when they came here. But you could take the trade-off for what things were now like, especially since things were very unequal back then. The more terrible you were in life, the less human your true demon form looked, and the more powerful you were. Deals with demons during life helped you have an unfair advantage there as well, making it possible to be an overlord of hell. You're not sure where you would have been placed, but you did not like the idea of such a system. That was how hell had been for most of history. Things had changed not all that long ago, when one of the most powerful and frightening overlords of hell, a demon by the name of Alastor, took over. He had entered hell in 1933, having been a prolific cannibal serial killer who used voodoo magic and had been in contact with demons. This gave him a powerful advantage, which allowed him to become one of the most powerful beings in hell and overthrow many overlords who had been there a lot longer. He was known as the Radio Demon due to his affinity for radio, which he used to his advantage, broadcasting his killings across hell for all to hear. While he showed great power then, it was still nearly a century before he was finally able to topple Lucifer himself and kill Hell's royal family. This was so long after his initial acts that he had become known as a has-been. Despite his notorious power, this was still a shock to all that he had finally accomplished his goal of taking over all of hell. His adamant refusal to graduate from the early 1930s radio technology he felt comfortable with had been holding him back for so long. Yet he still eventually found a way to expand his power and succeed in the end with much clever trickery. Now with Alastor in charge, hell was no longer practically ruled in name only. Alastor used his now even stronger powers to warp hell into a strictly controlled dictatorship he desired, in which he was the only one with any powers or the ability to transform into a more monstrous form. Now everyone was a deer demon. They all had false deer ears shaped out of hair, deer tails, and cute little mini antlers, even the females, because this was the look he liked. He held back on outright controlling their minds, but they were required to let him think for them. This was accomplished with it being impossible to not be within earshot of radios. Broadcasts of the radio demon entertaining and educating the masses were aired constantly, except, of course, at night, when it turned to white noise when everyone was supposed to be sleeping. A smile was always required to be on everyone's face. Everyone was expected to be happy and polite. Technology and fashion were forever stuck in the early 1930s. If someone were to swear, the word would be replaced with visible radio static coming out of their mouth. All sexual acts, as well as speaking of them, were forbidden. Everyone was branded with property of the radio demon. You were his dear, and during his broadcasts, he frequently referred to everyone as my dear. Alastor was always aware of everything going on. He was always watching you to make sure you thought highly of him and were obeying his rules. If you were noticed breaking a rule or not loving the radio demon, you would be killed permanently and made into venison. This was the main thing everyone in hell was expected to eat now. Because of the strictness of these rules, the population of hell went down very drastically in the first few years of his rule. This made obsolete of hell's previous form of population control, yearly purges enacted by beings from heaven. Because there was such a surplus of meat, and Alastor did not want to run out of his deer, he softened up just a little bit. He did not like using outright mind control. However, he did offer medicines that helped make it easier for those struggling to control their thoughts and behaviors to do so. This worked wonders for those trusting enough to take them who were most at risk. You were quite amazed to discover what hell was like by the time you arrived there. It was a place where you could relax and not have to worry about making bad decisions if you just followed the rules and were a good little deer like he wanted you to be. Besides, you found yourself quite enamored with the radio demon as soon as you first saw and heard him. He was so handsome. His beautiful voice was very soothing. You hoped it were true that he sounded like that in person, due to his enchanted microphone being a part of him. You admired and respected his power and authority. He was someone you didn't mind just controlling your life and owning you, but were very grateful did. You didn't even have any qualms about eating your own kind if this is what he wanted for you. You admit you didn't really like having to live like it was 100 years ago, but you could adjust to it due to how much you loved your ruler. This was far from a punishment for you. You felt genuinely happy here and never had to struggle to keep up your mandatory smile like you did on Earth. You doubted it was like this for most dear demon though. This was still hell, even if it was very different from how it had been for thousands of years. You knew very well how torturous a life with so little free will was for most people. You didn't mind though. You never cared enough about others. And besides, there was no way to tell this was true when they all seemed so happy. You knew there must be some around here who felt as genuine as you did. You would just pretend they all did. You were a little insecure. Part of you did care about how much everyone must be suffering. That part of you hoped no one would realize that you were one of, if not the only one who loved it here. Of course, the main reason you loved it here and could be so accepting of such strict rules that were quite different from the ones that would be in place if you were in charge, was because of how much you loved the one who now owned you. You were so pleased to get to hear Alastor's kind voice all day every day. It made your heart flutter. Obeying him gave you such a comfort and felt like an act of love. You dreamt of him every night, though did wonder if he was controlling dreams, despite avoiding other mind control. Nobody seemed too sure though. You wanted more than anything to meet him in person and let him know how much you appreciated everything about him. You hoped he loved his deer as much as he said he did, and didn't just enjoy doing this due to the suffering that it surely meant to cause. That didn't matter too much though. You felt if he met you, he would be able to tell that your love for him was genuine, and that he would appreciate this. Now, those who were bad little deer weren't just killed on sight. They were taken away to be held and executed by the radio demon himself live on air. He was always holding radio contests as the only way to receive tickets to see the executions in person. You always entered these and hoped you would be lucky this time. You knew very well that there were probably very few who wanted to attend these executions. However, almost everyone attempted to call in and win the tickets each time. It was important to act like you admired everything Alastor did to stay in his good graces and be a good little dear. Due to this, you knew it could be a very long time before you finally won, but you could never give up hope. Your heart fluttered more than usual the day you were the correct caller. It was hard to contain your excitement talking directly to the radio demon and being told you had won a ticket. The ticket was materialized magically into your hands by him. There was something just so heartwarmingly special to you about the fact that he knew your exact location. You could hardly sleep the night before the execution. You could barely believe that this was finally about to happen. You really hoped he would notice you in the crowd. You also knew that sometimes he invited a lucky deer up onto the stage to assist him in the execution, showing their obedience and usually probably fake enthusiasm in being a good little deer. You hoped he would pick you this time, but tried not to hold your breath for it. Just being there and able to see him was lucky enough. Finally, the time had come for your dreams to come true. You were standing in a crowd in front of the large stage where soon the magnificent ruler of hell were to appear, with the bad deer who were to be punished. You couldn't remember feeling nearly as elated as you did when he materialized. He was so much more handsome in person, if that were even possible. You cheered for Alastor with the wildest possible grin on your face. You weren't the only one cheering, but you were shouting out how much you loved him louder than anyone else was. The radio demon looked very pleased at his crowd, though he told everyone to politely calm down. What you heard was true. He did sound like he was talking out of a radio, even in person. You saw him scan the crowd. Now, my dear, which one of you would like to volunteer to help me punish these bad deer and set a good example for righteous behavior I expect from my dear? He said enthusiastically. You jumped up and down with joy as you cheered for him to pick you. You were not the only one doing this, but you hoped more than anything he would notice how genuine your love and enthusiasm was. How about you over there? He said, looking and pointing directly at you. You could barely believe it. He noticed you. You quickly calmed down and walked up to the stage, holding back tears of joy. You felt like you could float away with how much happiness and love was filling you right now. Before you knew it, the radio demon was shaking your hand and looking you directly in the eyes. It's a pleasure to meet you. And he stated your name. You were not surprised he knew your name, given how he was able to keep track of all his deer and who they were. It still felt very special to be personally greeted by him. Pleasure to meet you as well, my lord. You replied confidently, impressed how well you hid you were a bit nervous. Please, call me Al, my dear. He replied, surprisingly humbly. You couldn't believe how kind and loving he seemed, especially in person. You were sure he couldn't be completely cold and unfeeling, with how warm he always managed to seem. You really sensed that he could sense how genuine and strong your feelings were for him. Now, should we give these delicious and bad deer what's coming to them? He exclaimed as he handed you the hatchet. You nodded cheerfully and accepted it. It wasn't long before you had finished helping him chop up the 3 sad and disobedient deer who had been tied up on the stage. He could easily kill them instantly with a little magic, but he knew this left so much more of an impact. As things were wrapping up and you began to walk away, Al stopped you. My dear, would you like to go back and have dinner with me tonight? He asked in a friendly, yet almost commanding way. Yes, I would love to, you exclaimed, surprised he would offer this to you. You were soon magically transported into the dining hall of Al's capital mansion. The small table was instantly candlelit and set with a gourmet venison dinner for 2. It looked quite lonely here. This did not surprise you, however, as you knew Alastor was somewhat of a loner. He usually did everything by and for himself and was quite happy that way. It was no secret he was a narcissist, which is why he had desired such strict control over and admiration of a large population. You had never heard him invite one of his deer over for dinner before and wondered what was going on. Part of you was a little afraid, though you had also never heard of him capturing someone for an execution this way either. Plus, you were quite confident in how good you were at being a good little deer. My dear, he began almost shyly as you sat down with him. You couldn't remember seeing him almost slip like this before. You're probably wondering why I invited you over for dinner, aren't you? Yes, though it is a great honor, and I have complete faith in your decisions. I can see that very clearly in you, my dear, he said reassuringly and pleased. I have never seen a deer radiating with such strong and genuine devotion to me. I am quite aware of what most my deer think of me, and are quite scared of me. Most demons have always feared me, and with good reason. There is nothing I can do to stop myself from being such a monster. It is who I am, and what I always will be. I just could not be comfortable with anything less than such power and control over everyone. Now you really felt like you could sense his smile almost slipping. Was he really not happy as he seemed? He continued, as much as it pleases me to have all this power and control and force everyone to love me and be who I want them to be, I have never been able to fool myself into feeling like this is all genuine. I cannot bring myself to truly take their free will and minds to love me. That wouldn't feel real either. And besides, the monster in me enjoys the suffering. His smile seemed more genuine. You, however, have been different. I have noticed something very unusually genuine about the love you feel for me. And I can tell you enjoy being my dear a lot more than anyone else does. He noticed your smile widen as he continued. You're probably aware of how alone I have always been. Even though I seem like I am very happy this way, the truth is I do feel quite a bit of loneliness. I do not feel I require romance like others do, but I have been waiting for a deer who genuinely loves me, despite how much I control their life. I have always hoped that once I finally notice a deer like this, they would want to be a close companion to me. Would you like to spend the rest of eternity by my side, as a life partner who appears on the radio with me and assists in every execution and is always my truest friend? Yes! You exclaimed without hesitation, tears of joy starting to run down your face. You knew he was always a deal-maker demon, so you held out your hand to shake on it. You looked more elated than you had ever seen or heard him as he sealed the deal. You knew this was the start of something far more special than just being here. You had never been happier being his dear.